As a hiring manager who has both hired and fired in the past, what are you looking for when you hire a junior software developer?
Yeah. So for me, attitude is the biggest thing I look for, right? Teaching people how to code better is relatively straightforward. I've actually given two junior devs I guess you could say, a chance this way. I see that they have the attitude and the hunger for it. And in doing so, I can tell they're just going to succeed in the field
Mhm.
because I was the same way. Right? And so by looking for the right attitude and I guess cultural fit for the company, um, that's the first thing I think that I look for. The second thing is more so like, what have you learned on your own? And I like to do things this way. If I see that there's a skill gap, I will literally buy them a course on Udemy and be like, finish this because I know
Yeah.
it's gonna fill in the gap, right?
Well, and it's in your best interest. The better they get, the better for your company, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it helps me, right? Because if the person can finish the course, uh, then I know they have the work ethic to actually get the job done.
Mhm.
So it's a mixture of those three things, I think. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I would say that's really good to hear because I feel like so many developers I work with have really great attitudes. They sacrifice so much to go through the boot camp, family time, finances, previous life that they're giving up.
Right.
But the hardest thing for them is trying to leverage their attitude, their work ethic, because when they finally apply to a position, there are 700 other applicants. The resume gets skimmed,
Mm,
and it's so hard to show that attitude
mm,
in the resume, right? You have to get that interview, but how do you get that interview to show your attitude if your resume is not, getting you those interviews? So, if it's okay, let's talk about the resume
sure.
here for a bit. How can you show that attitude on the resume, or how can you use that resume when you have no experience to help you stand out from the pack?
Yeah. Well, that's a loaded question, right? Because there's two ways to tackle this situation. The first way to do it is good old legwork, right? Something I encourage a lot of people to do, and people don't like it. I encourage people to call recruiting companies. I encourage people to cold email hiring managers, cold email recruiters, ask people for introductions. And the reason I say that is because I do these things when I'm in the market. And I have a decade and a half of experience, right? So, like,
Yeah.
if I'm doing these things, you better believe people should also be doing these things. And here's my reasoning behind it. There's 1,000 junior developers that could do exactly the same thing that every other junior developer can do. The difference is that if you have a go-getter attitude, the hiring manager will literally send you. Chances are, like, they'll literally send you the link to apply for a job, and they'll be waiting for your specific resume because you stood out, right?
Mhm.
So it takes the legwork. And then on the resume piece, I think as long as you show projects that you've completed, like through and through, I'm not talking about like you go and clone Netflix on GitHub and say, I've done this, right? No, that's not what I mean. I mean, I don't care if you've cloned the project, but as a hiring manager who's been doing this for a very long time, I can tell you, I could look at someone's code and be like, a junior did not write this, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's just not gonna happen. So that's the first thing. The second thing is try building something that's fairly complex on your own. You know what I'm saying? So something I highly encourage people to do is build a tic-tac-toe. It's really hard.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I mean, that's
really
not a
hard.
traditional like web development application that
I
would
know
require you to think outside the box a little bit.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can successfully build a tic-tac-toe and say to the hiring manager, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, um, this is who I am. I've been building in public on LinkedIn. And I know a lot of people are going to hate that I say that, but hear me out. Building in public will build you a brand. Building you a brand will get you opportunities. There's
Mhm.
no question about that.
Yeah, and it's all about differentiating yourself from the pack because anybody can put passionate software developer on their resume.
Yeah.
but not everybody is showing that they're a passionate software developer
Yeah.
by doing all this extra legwork that you talk about, reaching out to hiring managers, talking to them, describing your experience. When your biggest differentiator is your motivation, you have to show that motivation by
Yeah.
doing the things that the other developers are not doing.
Oh, yeah.
So when you are in that interview, then, or maybe you're reviewing the resume,
Mhm.
you're looking for passionate developer, you're looking for other projects. What are some common, red flags that or things that some of the worst candidates are doing that people should avoid?
Man, so many. Um, Using a fake resume is like my number one turn off, right? What I mean by that is saying you have experience you don't.
Mm.
Um, so I'm a senior manager, but I still write code, right? So if I get in front of you and you say, I don't know, wrote this Node API that speaks to auto, whatever, right? I'm gonna be like, really? What's what's the name of that API again?
Yeah, how
How
did you
how
use it?
how did you
Yeah,
use it? Can you point me to the documentation? You know what I'm saying? Because I've been doing this for such a long time that I can see through the bull crap, right?
yeah.
So don't use fake experience. And I think the second thing, and for me the biggest thing, is showcase what you can actually do in writing. So why in writing? Because I'm gonna glance at your resume and say, "Oh wow, look, this person built a tic tac toe. Man, that's kind of complex. I'm interested in talking to this individual, right? Because I know at the back of my head that stuff is not easy to do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is make it easy for, um, well, this is part like something good that they can do. Make it easy for people to find your LinkedIn and find your GitHub. Um, that's probably something good that they can do. But
So are you going out and are you searching GitHub for developers, or what do you mean by make your GitHub look good?
accessible, yeah.
Yeah.
So it means that if on a whim I literally have the time to check your GitHub, I will. Because as a junior engineer, as a hiring manager, we're both taking a chance on each other, right? You're taking a chance that I'm a good manager, and I'm taking a chance that you're a good engineer. So how do we prove that to each other? How do we marry the two? It's very simple. If you can communicate well what you're doing, and I can see proof, so I can see receipt of what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
then you've got my confidence. Right?
Yeah, you said something interesting there. You said on a whim if you have a chance to
Right.
look at their GitHub. Are you saying that for a lot of your applications you don't even check out their portfolio?
Most of them I don't. You got to realize you have 700 people applying to a position, right? And you have this position that's extremely urgent to hire for. What do? You look for your most qualified a person, sorry. And um, but then you also have positions that you can take your time with when you're hiring, and that's for the more junior people. But
Mhm.
then you're like, okay, the first thing you do is you skim through the resumes and you say, okay, out of these 10, 20 qualified individuals, I want to make sure that I can vet these out personally, right? And so if you have 700 applications and only 20 make the cut, then I'm vetting all these people personally. So for the most part, I don't look at people's GitHub, but for those 20, you better
You
believe
do.
I do.
Yeah, so then just to explain this to the listeners
Yeah.
here, there's probably, I'm assuming here, stop me if I'm wrong, a recruiter that is doing that first filter
Right.
and
Right.
then finding the qualified candidates, and that's the one that you vet further.
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I've done it both ways, which is why I skipped the recruiter piece. So for startups, generally you're the one recruiting.
Yeah.
So it's like the recruiter. But I worked with recruiters also at a bigger company that they vet the people for you. Um, and I think that's more fair for the candidates in the sense that a recruiter is not technical, so they'll have a lot more compassion. And they come to me and they say, look, I found this person. They might not have the experience, but they're an amazing individual. Talk to them. Cool. But if I'm the one that's recruiting actively, I'm looking on LinkedIn and I'm like, who is posting? Why are they posting? Interesting. Let me go look at their profile. They have their resume. Ta-da. Fantastic. You see what I'm saying? Look, they have
Yeah,
their
yeah.
GitHub. Great. I can make an assessment like that. I can make a
So
decision like that.
a
You know?
couple of points to call out here that I think is really interesting. So for a lot of companies, this is outside of startups. So I'm thinking for mid-sized, large companies, it's going to be the recruiter. That's your first line of defense, which means your resume is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah.
And I've seen developers just iterate for forever on portfolio projects, but still have trash resumes. And
Yeah.
in a very real way, it doesn't really matter how good your portfolio is if the recruiter is probably not even going to look at it. It's not even going to make it to somebody like you who
Yeah.
can actually vet it out.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is you mentioned you would go on LinkedIn and you would see who's posting and who's talking there.
Right.
So is this after you've received a resume, you then go to LinkedIn to vet them out? Or are you saying you search for junior developers on LinkedIn yourself and you are proactively reaching out and trying to find them there? Help me understand how you're using LinkedIn in the
Yeah.
example you described.
Yeah. So if I know I have like a junior to mid-level role opening up, before I even bother my recruiter, I go on LinkedIn and I proactively look for the person. Why? The reason is twofold. Everybody has to understand that recruiters cost a lot of money. So if I can save the company money, I'd be in a very good spot.
Mhm.
Two, I know for a fact that the person I vet out, I have already spoken to. I have already assessed that they are, really hardworking. And three, I've looked at their resume more than they probably stalked their ex, right?
Yeah.
And their LinkedIn, right? So like I've already pre-made my decisions of who I want to speak to. So then I go
Mhm.
to my recruiter and I say, hey, these are the people I want to speak to. And you'd be amazed at how many hiring managers I've spoken to that do this, right? So it's interesting because there's a general consensus that hiring managers don't do that. But when you actually talk to these people, they're doing it.
Well, if you're using an external recruiting agency that it costs so much money,
Yeah, man.
then you'd be stupid not to try and
Of
go
course.
around that if you can.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So it's but with an internal recruiter, things are slightly different, right? Because then they can apply and it doesn't really cost the company all that much more money. Um, so that's where your experience is really gonna matter. And that's where your resume is really gonna matter. And one thing I'll add to that is that's where the format of your resume is gonna matter. So why do I say that? Most people with new resumes have they categorize how much they know HTML or C sharp or whatever. It's so weird. I'm like, how do you know that you know that much?
3 out of 5 stars,
Yeah.
HTML. Like, what?
Like what does that even mean? Right. So
Yeah.
for me, I've been writing JavaScript, TypeScript now for well over a decade. And I would say I'm not like no better than like a four, right? Like,
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
on a
yeah.
good day, on a good day, So when someone comes to me, they're like, "I'm a 5 out of 5." I'm like, "You should be interviewing me, man." Yeah.
And all they've done is, a 3-month boot camp.
Yeah.
You're like, 5 out
Yeah.
of 5,
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, exactly. So the resume format I always encourage people to use is the one on I think it's careercup.com. The lady who wrote Cracking the Coding Interview, she
Okay.
has a format that is basically plain black and white. Okay. But it gets the point across. This is where you worked
Mhm.
at. This is what you did. This is why. Goodbye.
No frills, easy to skim.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. And for the love of God, don't include your picture on the resume. It's kind of weird. Uh,
I would say so that the example that you're sharing here, is that something that template freely accessible for everybody? Is that
yeah.
something
Yeah.
we can put in a link in the show notes? Okay, let me
Yeah.
grab that from you after, and we'll put that in the show notes
Yeah.
for if people want to use that.
Yeah. That format actually got my resume picked up by like PricewaterhouseCoopers, by Space Force, Google, Microsoft. Like it's crazy because
Okay.
it literally drives your eyes to the information that's needed. Um, Pretty amazing.
And as
Uh,
a hiring manager, you can attest to it,
yeah,
right?
well, I got hired thanks to it, so yeah.
Yeah, it works. It works. About the resume here, I want to circle back on something you mentioned earlier. You
Sure.
talked about don't lie
Yeah,
on the experience that you have there. I want to talk a little bit. I'm not saying you should lie. I'm not, but I want to unpack a little bit what lying means here.
sure,
If you are a new developer, the most difficult thing to do is get that first work experience.
sure.
So if you were to put on your resume, freelancer, and
Mm,
maybe you are doing some trying to do some side work,
mm,
contractor or even self-employed,
mm.
how do you perceive that as a hiring manager?
Personally, man, code is code. Okay. If you're writing code for yourself or if you're writing code for others, you're writing code. Right. It's kind of like people who are like, a person with a permit shouldn't be driving by themselves. Like, okay, you do realize that they're still driving the car, right? Like the fact is still the same, right?
Yeah, yeah. They need
So
supervision, sure, but
yeah,
they're
but
they're
they're still
doing it.
driving, right? So it's the same way for me. Like if you are self-employed or a freelancer, you're still doing the work. That still matters.
If you are a freelancer, you put that on your resume, but you've not signed a single contract. I guess what I'm trying to unpack here is a lot of new developers that I work with, they will, put the title on their LinkedIn and their resume, software engineer,
Sure,
and they'll have their projects that they did in their boot camp,
sure.
sure. But then you hit their work experience section and it's, retail worker, barista. They put, all the non-relevant experience that they have. And they
Mm,
try to highlight what's relevant, what's crossover communication skills, customer service, whatever.
mhm.
But that work experience section, I feel like needs to show some initiative. You talked about passion, right? Whether that's, freelancing or starting your own small business and trying to build a product underneath that. I
Mm.
feel like when I've reviewed resumes, I like to see at least one line item on there that's relevant for the position they're applying for. I just want to confirm if that is how you perceive that work experience on the resume as well, or if I'm kind of
Well,
off
yes
base
and
here.
no. Yes and no. And here's what I'll say. Um, Writing code and working at Starbucks have very little to do with each other, right? Um, I would rather see a resume that says freelancer for the last 6 months and nothing else that has nothing to do with it, with the situation of with the role, basically. The
Interesting. Okay.
reason I'm saying that is because I will assess that you have good communication skills the moment I talk to you. Right? Like I will assess that you know what you're talking about the moment I talk to you, that you have good customer service skills, that you know how to speak to people the instant I talk to you. But I will make a lot of preconceived judgments if I see that you don't have any prior experience before the one that you're doing as a freelancer. So from my perspective, and from a lot of people's perspective, right? Like I want to know what you've done relative to the role that you're applying for. And then as the relationship unfolds, you can say, I used to be a Batista.
Yeah.
Good for you. And because what tends to happen is, okay, assume you have two resumes in front of you, resume A, resume B. Resume A has Bartista, construction worker, pet groomer, professional dog walker. And then right on top of that, this person is a freelancer. Resume B has freelancer. Both skill sets and everything else equal. Who, like, from your perspective, Eric, I ask you this question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whose resume would you spend time reading?
Yeah. I mean, assuming they're all the same and it's just the expansive experience, it would be tough for me. I
Mm,
might actually still go for the dog walker, myself here.
mm,
I would just say one. It depends on the previous roles, but if you are you like a supervisor at your Starbucks, right?
mm.
Is there some leadership experience? How many years of professional work do you have? Because what I'm trying to suss out as well is, can you work on a team? Can you take orders from somebody else?
I
Are
see.
you trustworthy? And if your previous work experience shows that you consistently showed up for a 9 to 5, you did that for, 5 years, you were promoted at that role, okay, so there's some sort of trust that a previous employer gave you. You had experience supervising other people.
Mm.
That gives me a greater sense of comfort, knowing that I could bring you in and you will not, be some rogue developer who's only used to working by themselves,
Yeah.
right?
So I see that point of view as well. My challenge is the time constraint I have to actually review resumes.
Sure,
Right.
sure. Yeah, yeah. What I'm describing, I'm sussing out a lot and I'm spending time to try
Yeah.
and suss
Yeah.
that out. I'm
Yeah.
not just necessarily skimming. That's true.
Yeah. That's my challenge, right? Like, if I'm going to be reading something, it has to be worth the time invested in it.
Yeah, and
And
hyper focused on the role that specific role that they're applying to.
exactly. So that's where I say, you might just want to put what's relative to the role because as you've been the manager before, you know how crazy busy we get.
Yes.
And it's like you don't have time to eat, let alone read someone a whole resume, you
I mean,
know?
you're behind. You're
Yeah,
overwhelmed. That's why you're hiring.
exactly the
You have
reason.
a full-time job you're trying to do and hire somebody else at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
um it's in the best interest of people to stick to what's relative. And eventually your resume is going to be 3 pages long because of so much experience you have. That's
Yep,
okay
yep.
because it's all relative, right?
Mhm.
Um, but as a junior engineer, I just want to see what I need to see, and what do I need to see? Everything that's relative to that particular role I'm hiring for. What one thing I'll add here is a big mistake people are making as junior devs is tailoring their resume for the role.
Okay.
Um, that's tricky, and I'm gonna tell you why. One, you don't have the experience to probably do that for 10 different companies, unfortunately. And two, um, anything you put on your resume is fair game to ask about, right? So you can get grilled on something that you say you did it on, you only read an article about it or you did a tutorial on it, and then what, right?
Mm.
So I would say stick to what you know well, even if it's not a lot. You know what I'm saying? Because then
Mhm.
you gain people's confidence doing it that way when they talk to you. So
Yeah, I'll add one other thing I wanna get your thoughts on,
sure.
because the follow-up question when you say, "Hey, don't include non-relevant work experience," well, for a lot of these juniors, that's gonna be a very short resume, half a page or so.
Yeah,
So I wanna get your thoughts on this then, right?
sure.
You fill it up with relevant activities. So open source contributions, you have like a volunteer work section.
Yeah.
Maybe you also do some work for like a local charity or nonprofit you're passionate about. There, donate code, Code for America, ragtag.org. These are all examples
Hmm.
of services I've seen developers use in the past for
Hmm.
for volunteer work. Put freelancing on there, put some contract work that you've done under that. Even if it's unpaid, I'm sure you can find a friend or family member who's willing for you to build something for them just so you can say, right, you built code that solves a real business problem that's not just your own idea.
Right.
Um, and then the capstone work you do, don't list, the weather tracker app, the kind of the tutorials that you follow, but some of the side projects that you built that actually are complex that, as you mentioned. And then I think if you do those, handful of things, you can probably flesh out a resume even if you have very little
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I would say if you do freelancing, um, that's one of the things that benefits from starting that technically as soon as you start your boot camp or before, because then you can have 6 months of experience in that role. Um, when you start applying as opposed to just a few weeks as a freelancer, towards the end of your boot camp when you start applying. Is there anything else I should say? Any commentary on those ideas, or is there anything else that a developer can put on to flesh out that resume if they don't have previous work experience, to put on there?
Yeah. So, um, I think if you get uh certificates, people in in software engineer are like certificates don't matter. Kind of do, right?
It shows that you're
Yeah.
going the extra mile.
Yeah. Especially if you're new to the industry. If you have any type of certificates, like I don't know, Neo4j, right? The graph database certificates. Well, those are huge, right? Especially right now, those are massive, right? Um, if you have any AWS certificates, those are only going to help you. GCP, Azure, those are only going to help you, right? So those are the type of things I think I would add to your list. Um, because be mindful, right? Like as a hiring manager, if I get 20 resumes, I'm spending like 2 minutes at most on a resume, like at most. So
And
it,
anybody can put a once again, going back to going ab showing your passion. Anybody can put the word passionate software developer, but how are you showing that?
Mhm.
Anybody can put AWS under their skills on their resume, but not everybody is putting, an certified AWS developer
Yeah,
on their resume. So every assertion that you make on your resume, if you can back that up with evidence that shows it,
you're going to be
um,
in good shape.
exactly, absolutely.
Yeah,
Before we wrap up, though, you have an excellent newsletter that's focused on helping developers upskill themselves.
right.
So, as far as takeaway from this conversation, can you kind of describe what that newsletter is and what it does, and kind of help our listeners know how they can get signed up for it?
Yeah. So essentially, the newsletter is about designing a scalable system, specifically in the front end. There's a ton of back end ones, but there's very, very little front end stuff around this stuff. So we're designing things like Airbnb, Pinterest, Google Sheets. I think next week it's like Amazon or WhatsApp. Um, so essentially, I'm grabbing people who don't know a thing about system design and teaching them pretty much everything that they need to know to have the ability to design a system or pass interviews as it relates to designing systems. So if you want to sign up or just check it out, it's systemsdesignchallenges.com.
And how much does it cost to sign up?
It's free.
Free, absolutely. So no excuse to not to upskill yourself and get better at designing these complex front ends.
Yeah.
Well, Ricardo, this is a great conversation. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you for coming, and
Thank you.
thank you to everybody that's listening. We will see you all next time.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the Junior Jobs Podcast. We hope you found today's interview helpful as you navigate your own job search in tech. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe, as that helps us reach more developers in need. And don't forget to check the show notes for details on today's sponsor and other job search services that we provide. Thanks for listening and have a great day.